Worst fears realised. The Australian death toll rises to 30 with 180 still missing. The revised figures come as Indonesian police detain 2 men over the bombings.
From National 9 News, this is Nightline with Hugh Remington.
Good evening. Also in the news, Kylie, the big winner at a glittering show of Australian talent at the ARIA Awards. But first to Bali. Authorities say some victims might never be formally identified. That grim task of trying to identify the dead continues, while Indonesian police seem to have made some progress in finding out who committed the outrage. In the latest updated official figures tonight, Indonesia puts the death toll at 180 people. The official confirmed Australian toll has risen tonight to 30. But 113 Australians remain seriously injured and another 180 are still officially listed as missing, fate unknown. In other developments, police are tonight questioning 2 men, both linked to the owner of an identity card found at the scene shortly after the attack. Indonesian authorities say sophisticated C4 explosive was used in at least one of the bombs that could indicate a link with the Indonesian military. After viewing the bomb site in Bali, Foreign Minister Alexander Downer has flown on tonight to Jakarta for more official talks. And with all the Australian injured survivors now home, the focus has turned to bringing back the bodies of the dead. From Bali, once again, Mark Burrows begins our coverage.
Hugh, as you could imagine, the Indonesian police are under enormous pressure to crack this case, not only from the Indonesian government, but also from governments around the world, notably Australia and the United States. Well, this is what we know this evening. The police here have detained 2 Indonesian nationals. One of them, we do know, has links to a man whose identity card was found at the scene of the blast. There's no talk at this stage of links to Al-Qaeda or any Muslim radical groups. That aside, most of the attention of the day was focused on the families who have flown to Australia to try and identify their loved ones. Also to the survivors who somehow got out of the bomb nightclub, but tragically lost family members and close friends.
On Akuta Beach backstreet, members of the Forbes Rugby Club remember 3 mates. The trio were inside the Sari nightclub when it was obliterated by the car bomb. One player, too injured to walk, was piggybacked to the scene. 4 days ago it was so different, many enjoying the excitement of their first overseas trip. Today they were inconsolable. The group laid a wreath and then gathered like they've done so many times before. Forbes was one of many Australian teams here celebrating the end of the season. They leave shattered, with so many mates left behind. Today, the first aerial view of the scene, showing the enormous area that was levelled. And evidence, too, of just how difficult it would have been to escape, especially for those at the back of the club who tried to get through the inferno near the epicentre of the bomb. And arriving in Bali today, scores of Australian families who lost loved ones in the blast. They joined survivors who lost family members at a special briefing held by consular officials. Here they were told of the difficulties authorities face in identifying the victims.
The Australian government has contracted an international disaster relief organisation. They are flying here, as we understand. Their role will be to prepare identified bodies for the return to Australia.
There's a lot of rallies in there that still can't identify their, well, they have 95% identified partners and things, but that's not good enough.
We lost 5 people, so it's quite frustrating. We've got parents here at the moment.
They want their loved ones' remains back home, but until they can be identified, they will stay in Bali.
Australian federal police officers attached with a victims identification unit have flown into Bali to help with a process that is shaping up to be painfully slow, despite their presence and admission today from Australian authorities that some victims will never be identified.
At the morgue at Denpasar Hospital, workers are hopelessly overwhelmed. Here families come in appalling circumstances to try and identify loved ones. Australia is sending in 5 refrigerated containers to help. In all this, two sisters came with flowers, a hope to try and add some dignity for a friend whose body is being stored in an ambulance.
Just to be with her before she goes.
In the last day or so, the shock is giving way to grief. On Kuta Beach, the Mecca that drew so many victims, a prayer for the fellow travellers who lost their lives.
It's our way to quietly express what really matters to us, which is love and peace and concern for all mankind.
And the grieving continues this evening. Extraordinary scenes at the actual site of the blast. And people have assembled for a candlelit vigil.
Taking part in this vigil tonight.
Is there, expatriates, holiday makers, family members and survivors, but incredibly thousands of Australians who have been caught in this blood.
We're obviously having some trouble picking up Mark Burrows there as he speaks to us from Dili as we get some vision just coming through of the vigil that is on there tonight. We'll try and get back to him later on in the bulletin. In the meantime, a group of amateur footballers from Perth has been forced to abandon their search for 7 missing teammates. The 11 members of the Kingsley Football Club vowed to stay in Bali until they learnt the fate of all their friends, but they've been able to find the remains of only one of those victims.
In the midst of the Bali disaster, no one has paid a higher human price than the Kingsley Football Club. 7 young Australians from Perth missing or dead. Finally today, this band of 11 survivors made a breakthrough, identifying one of their mates among the dead at Bali's morgue.
Yeah, we're not leaving until we know that 7 blokes have been identified before we go.
That job now is proving impossible for Kingsley coach Simon Quayle, who's bravely led his players in this desperate time. They'll hand over the task to Australian authorities and return home to Perth, where they'll be reunited with 2 injured teammates evacuated Sunday night.
It's a situation I'd never want to dream to be in again. It's not only the incident with the bombing, but just the, trying to find our mates.
In the terrifying moments after the blast, amid intense confusion, Simon Quayle says his players were heroic.
There's a guy, an individual, and I won't mention name because he just doesn't want anything to do with the media, and that's his choice. That he's had bodies on him. He helped rip burning flames off people. He was last out. He screamed out for anyone from noise. It was quiet, and he somehow got out.
Mark McGill reporting for Nightline.
Frustrated with waiting for news, some Australians are flying to Bali to look for any sign of their loved ones. It will be for most of them a forlorn journey, but hardly worse than the agonising wait for information here in Australia.
Desperately holding on to hope, Pat and Terry Stokes say they're trying to remain positive about their missing son, Jason.
I just hope, of all hope, that he's still with us. He can't be gone. He's not allowed to go. Not allowed to go.
The 31-year-old assistant coach of Perth's Kingsley Football Club had organised an end-of-season trip to Bali for the team.
I just want my son to come home.
That's all we want.
We would. Just someone to come and tell us what's happened.
Distraught and feeling absolutely helpless, Nicole Lewis refuses to give up.
Just if anyone has seen them.
Her 19-year-old brother Danny and his best mate, 18-year-old Craig Dunn from Ulladulla, had just arrived in Bali for a surfing holiday. They were drinking at the Surrey Club on Saturday night. Their families haven't heard from them since. Both fathers flew there this morning.
Any news, any information, just to set our minds at ease. Hoping that people will see the posters that we've got. People come back from Bali, may have seen him, have any information.
Also among the missing, 34-year-old Aaron Lee, his brother Justin and wife Stacey. Tired of waiting next to the phone, their brother Randall Lee decided to go over and look for them.
There's probably still a little bit of hope because we don't know for certain, but we know that they were definitely inside when it happened, and yeah, we basically got to go over and find out.
So it's tearing the whole family apart, just not knowing what's happened to them.
Described as inseparable, the 3 brothers were all supposed to be on the trip. Randall, however, had to pull out.
One thing we probably can be thankful for, they basically lived every moment, so if it has come to bad news, well, at least we know that they've had a good time while they've been here, and we just got to cling to whatever we can keep. So.
Christina Maglaris is also clinging on. Her cousins Elizabeth Kontranakis, Christine Betmelik and friend Louisa Zervos are still missing. They were in Bali meeting up with Elizabeth's twin sister Maria, who was on her honeymoon.
To go on a honeymoon and expect it to be such a memorable thing and it just be destroyed by something as tragic as that. I mean, they're fantastic girls and they're always together and happy people.
One of the Australians now confirmed dead is 38-year-old Kathy Salvatore. She'd been holidaying with her husband Craig, a former rugby league international, and their 2 young daughters.
All we can say is we're just terribly sad, and she was an incredible sister and mother.
Late yesterday, when Kathy's fate was still unknown, Craig put his daughters on a flight home. When they arrived, they were told of the news. Doctors today had to sedate them.
Well, they're not good, so
they know that their mummy's in heaven.
Anna Corrin reporting for Nightline.
Throughout the day, every major Australian airport was once again filled with shocked travellers today, relieved to be home, but many of them bringing with them tales of horror and narrow escapes. In Perth, Simon Jonas was in the Sari Club and saw desperately injured people staggering, screaming through the streets. He also saw many bodies.
You shouldn't be here, really. Someone's giving me a second chance.
He managed to crawl out with his girlfriend, Donna Richardson, who was desperate to stay alive for her 6-year-old son.
Thought of him and I had to get out. I didn't want him to be without a mum.
The couple was in Bali for a wedding. The groom is still missing. Almost all of the 60 mostly seriously injured survivors who were evacuated to Darwin have now been flown to hospitals in their home states. Doctors say their burns and other injuries are similar to those seen on war victims.
It was an opportunity for the injured to be in their home cities close to family and friends. The operation was carried out with military precision. In convoy, the injured were placed onto 3 waiting Hercules aircraft, while critical cases were transported one at a time in Learjets. At the hospital, an emotional farewell for families and staff. Leslie Ball's daughter-in-law Tracy will return home to Perth with serious burns.
We're just grateful that she's alive. It's a bonus. She's alive. There's many people out there who aren't as lucky as us right now because their family haven't survived and ours have.
Also there, Trent and Emily Mongan with a list of people they treated in Bali. The couple with extensive medical training were on holiday when they heard about the bomb and went straight to major hospitals, offering this heart-wrenching message to the relatives of those hurt.
We treated all your family the best we could with the stuff we had, and it was the most horrific, just terrible experience of my life.
Through the day, the shift continued, more patients making their way to the airport and the waiting Hercules, this one bound for Sydney. Doctors denied the hospital had buckled under the strain, insisting the purpose of the detour to Darwin was to treat patients so they could be moved.
I think the fatality numbers would have been far greater had they travelled from Bali directly to, say, Sydney or Melbourne.
From a total of 61 casualties, all brought in yesterday, just 6 remain here in Darwin Hospital. Of those, 2 cases are critical. According to doctors at this stage, they simply would not survive another flight. 35-year-old Jodie Kearns, the stepdaughter of former Olympian Glynis Nunn, left hospital this afternoon, her left leg amputated and suffering severe burns. Her only hope is a specialist burns unit in Melbourne.
I've never been an emotional person, but when I saw her for the first time, I cried. I've never done it in my life. I couldn't recognise her. I didn't even know who she was.
Jodie arrived at Tullamarine Airport this evening and was quickly transferred to hospital. Also amongst the injured flown into Melbourne, a barely recognisable Kangaroos AFL player, Jason McCartney, taken away by helicopter. McCartney was in the Sari Club with teammate Mick Martin at the time of the blast. He remains in intensive care. At the burns unit in Sydney's Concord Hospital, 3 victims have arrived, with a further 6 expected. Dr. Peter Harsh says he's not seen anything like it in 22 years of burns surgery.
They're the sort of thing that you would only see in a warlike situation.
Another 14 of the injured were flown to Perth and 11 to Brisbane. Christine Spiteri for Nightline.
Foreign Minister Alexander Downer has arrived tonight in Jakarta with an urgent message for the Indonesian government. Be relentless in the hunt for the killers. Today he and Justice Minister Chris Ellison laid floral tributes amid the ashes of the Sari nightclub on behalf of all Australians before meeting families looking for loved ones.
At what is now hallowed ground, the Foreign Minister came to see the devastation for himself. The aftermath of the world's latest terrorist outrage. Mr. Downer had come to lay a wreath in memory of Australia's dead, clearly shocked by the scale of the destruction all around him.
What I've seen today is enough to break anyone's heart. It's a simply shocking sight, utterly appalling, and it drives home to anybody the evil of terrorism, of mass murder.
Mr. Downer's in Indonesia on an unscheduled visit to make it abundantly clear about what he now expects Jakarta to do.
That for Australia, our overwhelming priority is to see those who perpetrated this appalling crime brought to justice, and brought to justice soon.
At Bali's main public hospital, which has been overflowing with dead and injured, he thanks staff and volunteer workers and acknowledged that Indonesia was a victim of this atrocity too.
It breaks your heart to see what the terrorists have done, blowing up these buildings.
The investigation into what happened here now includes Australian forensic experts as well as body identification teams. Mr. Downer also says Australia is sending $300,000 worth of emergency medical aid. Among the political leaders he's meeting, Amin Rais, normally a stern critic of Canberra, now conceding that Australia may be correct in its belief that the bombers are Indonesian Islamic radicals. In Bali, Adrian Brown for Nightline.
And a short while ago, Mr. Downer touched down in Jakarta for more talks tomorrow with Indonesian leaders. He left Bali earlier tonight after inspecting the devastation at the bomb sites. Tomorrow he'll meet the Indonesian Foreign Minister, Dr. Wirayuda. Accompanying him on the flight is Justice Minister Chris Ellison, who will hold separate talks with the Chief of Indonesia's police force. We're going to return to Bali now, to Mark Burrows, the line there being restored. Mark, you were telling us a little earlier about the vigil that has been taking place there tonight. Who has been taking part?
Well, I guess it was the most notable part of the evening, Hugh. There were Westerners there, expatriates and holiday makers, families and, of course, survivors from the nightclub blast. But the most striking thing was the number of Balinese who have turned out in support of the Australians. The Balinese community has a very, very close affinity with the Australians. It has been that way for many, many years. Hindu majority Bali, well, some of the Balinese here have not taken too kindly to suggestions that this was a Muslim bomb blast. There were many, many people there in a continuous procession throughout several hours. They came, laid wreaths, and some spread rose petals at the scene. It was an extremely eerie sight, a sight of so much tragedy lit by candlelit this evening. Hugh.
Yes, certainly large crowds there, Mark. We're also hearing some intriguing reports tonight of traces of explosives being found at the scene, something called C4, and we're told that's something that's not normally associated with terrorist attacks. What can you tell us about that?
Well, Hugh, Indonesia's intelligence chief is saying that traces of C4 plastic explosive, known in other parts of the world as Semtex, was found at the scene. Well, this type of explosive is normally used by military, Indonesian military. It's not normally associated with terrorists, in particular terrorists operating in Indonesia. They usually prefer bombs made that are based on fertilizer. So this development, this fact, if it's true, seems to indicate an increasing sophistication, a sinister development, certainly in this case.
Possibly, presumably, the chance of some links with the Indonesian military.
It's certainly being investigated, although no one is saying that at this stage, Hugh. Still, we're getting rumours that there are still links of this group, possibly with Al-Qaeda, still links with the radical Muslim group based on Java, but still nothing to confirm at this stage that the military are in any way involved.
Okay, Mark Burrows in Bali. Thank you once again. Ahead on Nightline, the Prime Minister denies Australia was forewarned about the terrorist attacks. And the Islamic cleric accused of masterminding the bombings blames the United States.
slashing your fuel bill.
I'm saving big money.
More than 10% off every tank full.
My engine is running so much better.
Try it and test it, it really works.
Saving me about $8 a week.
A Current Affair tomorrow, 6:30.
One of the things I really love about Fernwood is that it's for all women. Sue, Fernwood really has changed your life.
Last year when I joined Fernwood at 49, I was 28 kilos heavier and felt 10 years older.
And now?
I've got so much energy. I'm strong, confident and healthy.
And it's such a great atmosphere.
Yeah, women only, so you relax straight away.
Come on, do it for yourself.
Call today and go into the draw to win a $5,000 fashion wardrobe from Suzanne.
We really will change your life.
Ladies, today we learn the secret of how to be a grade 1-900 operator. The Magnum cone, far superior to any other cone, a staggering 20% bigger, handy for those long calls. Thick Magnum chocolate, real ice cream. Just check out those nuts. Madeline, drop the innuendo. Phrases like, oh, how I love it, you're so big, will simply roll off the tongue. Right, girls, you have all you need. The rest is up to you.
Call me. Call me now.
Trophy Hi-Fi is smashing prices on the animated comedy hit Ice Age on DVD for a cool $24.69 and VHS for only $19.69. Because DVDs are always cheap at JB. JB, you've done it again.
In business, don't wait for nightfall to get off peak mobile rates. We give them to you during business hours. Just 10 cents for 30 seconds. That's Optus Business Edge.
Welcome back to this special edition of Nightline. The Prime Minister says there is now growing evidence that Al-Qaeda and the Indonesian group Jemaah Islamiyah were behind the attacks. He has rejected suggestions the government received US intelligence advice specifically warning that tourist destinations like Bali were about to be targeted by terrorists.
It was a sombre but resolute John Howard who told Federal Parliament he now had little doubt who was responsible for the atrocities in Bali, which have claimed so many Australian lives.
There is, Mr. Speaker, mounting evidence of Al-Qaeda involvement together with Jemaah Islamiyah in the attack.
Jemaah Islamiyah is a radical Indonesian Islamic organisation with apparent links to Osama bin Laden's terrorist group.
We will be moving, Mr. Speaker, as a government to have Jemaah Islamiyah listed as a terrorist organisation in the United Nations as soon as possible.
The opposition didn't hesitate in backing the Prime Minister.
Let us be under no illusion. This organisation, Jemaah Islamiyah, is a threat to Australian security, it is a threat to Indonesian security, and it is a threat to regional security.
It's still unclear as to the accuracy of a report in the Washington Post that US intelligence authorities specifically warned that a tourist destination such as Bali could be a terrorist target. Mr. Howard says Australia certainly never received any such advice.
I can only repeat what I said in the Parliament yesterday, that we had no warning of the specific attack that occurred.
There seems no question, though, that the Indonesians chose to ignore US warnings of the more general threat posed by radical groups operating inside their country.
Indonesia has had warnings of this and has tended not to do terribly much about them.
As for the victims and their families, the Prime Minister said the government would pay for the cost of having the remains of those who died flown home.
We will also pay the cost of any Australians who need to go to Bali in order to assist with identification.
Mr. Howard said if there was anything else the government could reasonably do to help people caught up in the tragedy, it would do so. Laurie Wilson reporting for Nightline.
Indonesia faces growing international pressure to do now what it has been unable to do in the past, face up to the Islamic terror organisations within its borders and deal with them. US President George Bush is demanding action from Indonesian President Megawati Sukarno Putri. He has described the bombers and their supporters as cold-blooded killers.
He's dealt with overwhelming grief and comforted a damaged nation. And he knows what Australians might be feeling right now.
These are nothing but cold-blooded killers. They do not value life the way we value life in the civilized world.
The Bali blasts are the deadliest acts of terrorism since September 11.
They just blow up in the name of a religion which does not preach this kind of hatred or violence.
Mr. Bush has been keeping in close contact with Prime Minister Howard.
Last night I called Prime Minister Howard of Australia to express our country's deepest sympathies to the citizens of that good country who lost their lives.
2 Americans died in Bali, lawyer Jake Young and surfer Steve Webster, but as Australians did last September, Americans are now tuned to our grief.
In Australia, you can just imagine the pain and shock.
The bloodshed in Bali seems to have fired up the US president, even more determined to smash terrorism and Saddam Hussein, even if it means risking further terror retaliation.
We will fight, if need be, the war on terror on 2 fronts. We've got plenty of capacity to do so.
Osama bin Laden today released a typed statement to Arabic television. He congratulated the terrorists responsible for last week's bombing of a French oil tanker and the killing of 2 US Marines in Kuwait. There was no mention of Bali, but terror analysts think the statement may have been written before Kuta was targeted. In the United States, Michael Usher for Nightline.
A visibly angry British Prime Minister has vowed the Bali atrocity will stiffen the West's resolve in the war against terrorism. 33 British citizens are dead or missing, plunging Britain into national mourning.
These are the faces of young people who've been lost to British families. The toll here has climbed steadily since keen surfer Mark Gajardo from Cornwall was named the first UK victim. He walked outside the Surrey club for a breath of fresh air into the path of the bomb. His girlfriend stayed on the dance floor and lived.
So angry that someone can come and take away the life of an innocent person, a loving person who had so much to give. It's so unfair and it's so needless.
Steve Spear is among the missing. His family and friends in Scotland know time is running out.
I think we're all clutching at a vague hope that he will surface unscathed. We also know that that's a very, very unlikely eventuality.
On the evacuated list, is there anybody who has been evacuated who is anonymous?
Londoner Mark Weingard today flew to Bali in search of his fiancée Annika.
I'm going to find her at any cost. I'm going to find her whether she's alive, whether she's dead. I'm going to find her, and I want to take her home.
One of the masterminds of the war on terror, Tony Blair, looking drawn but determined, today tried to rally the world once more against terrorism.
As the events in Bali showed, they will strike anywhere, anytime, at any place, and they really do not care how many innocent people they kill. And the response of ourselves and the whole of our partners in the international community has got to be one of total vigilance and total determination to take whatever measures are necessary, nationally and internationally, to deal with this, and that is what we will do.
Mr. Blair has also spoken to John Howard to offer his condolences and his support for tracking down those responsible. A team of counter-terrorist experts from Scotland Yard is already in Singapore on standby to assist. Damien Ryan, National 9 News.